Whether or not you're new to Magic the Gathering or are just trying to build your own homebrew, one thing that can be really hard to get down is the appropriate mana base. By this I mean the amount of lands you want to run in your deck and the type of mana that those lands would potentially produce. I think the mana base can often be considered to be the spine of any good deck, as without it, the deck cannot effectively function properly, as you can't efficiently cast the spells. Getting this down and getting this right can be a bit of a hassle at times, considering that you, have to playtest and consider what lands you may want to run. Oftentimes, having an inappropriate mana base can lead to hands like this, really, or this. Really? Fortunately, it's pretty easy to avoid problems like this, as there's some pretty easy rules to follow when creating a mana base for any deck. The first of which is to consider your mana curve, which is the amount of spells of each converted mana cost that there are in your deck. If your deck runs a fairly low curve of spells between converted mana costs of 1 to 3, then you may need that many lands. Considering a deck with 20 lands will draw a land card roughly every 3 draws, it's very likely that that will be enough land for a deck of that curve. However, a deck with a higher curve of spells between 4 or higher may want to add more depending on what its needs may be. Usually it's best to think of what your deck tries to do and what spells you want to play. If the spell you want to play is of a converted mana cost of 4 or greater, you may want to try to make sure you get your 4th land drop, considering if it's that important to your deck. The second thing you have to keep in mind when making a mana base is what colors are your lands going to produce. If you only play one color in your deck, then this is pretty easy to solve, as most of your lands will likely be basic lands. If you know you play a deck with multiple colors, then this will be a bit of a puzzle, but there's actually a really easy way to solve it. The thing you want to do is to keep track of how many spells of each color you play. Once you have figured out what spells are the most important in your deck, or what colors are the most important in your deck, then you want to design your mana base so that it's able to cast those spells, but at the same time support the other colors in your deck. While some of these concepts may be a little bit tricky to grasp, considering, you're just looking at my face right now, I'll be glad enough to show you an example. So for today's video of showing you how to build a mana base, I decided to show my Greater Good deck and how I came to the mana base on that. Honestly, considering I've worked on this deck and been playing this deck for, quite a long time now, the mana base has come to several different versions. Just for starters, I have here all the spells in the deck according to their mana curve. I have 9 1-drops, 5 2-drops, 13 3-drops, 7 4-drops, 1 5-drop, and 1 11-drop. This means I know that I probably want a bit more than 20 lands in my deck, considering I want to power up spells that are 4 to 5 mana. Plus, considering that the most important cards in the deck are Court of Calling and Greater Good, which usually cost about 4 to 5 mana depending on the situation of the game, you do want to have those lands and make sure we hit our land drops. Whenever you build a deck, you want to just make sure you count the number of pips in each of your cards. So, since I know that there are 3 green pips in Court of Calling, 2 green pips in Greater Good, and there are several other cards in the deck that run green, or I can play with green, like 2 for Kitchen Finks, I know that green is the most important color. Now, one thing about this deck is that it does have 4 colors, and since I know that the most important cards in the deck are green, I know that most of my lands need to produce green mana. The other support colors in the deck are black, white, and blue, but the only other blue card I run in the main deck is the Master Biomancer, which is that 4-drop over there in the top right. So mainly, I want to be able to get at least 3 green mana to at least cast our Court of Callings, at least 1 black and 1 white mana. From here on out, you just want to count the other pips in the deck and make sure you can determine which other colors in your deck are the most important. So as you can see, this is the mana base for the deck, and as it turns out, I run a lot of green mana. In my basics corner, I run 4 forests and 1 swamp and 1 plains because I know black and white are the most common colors for support. I do run a few blue sources, but they're mainly in forms of dual lands. If you can't afford them, fetch lands are ideal for developing a mana base with multiple color decks, as you can just fetch whatever lands you want when you need it. This does, however, thin out your deck, so you may want to consider that when you do use a fetch land, you're probably going to draw less lands later in the game. Looking at the rest of the dual lands, I do run a lot of fetchable lands with green. I believe I run 5, which is quite a bit considering I have all these extra lands that can fetch them. So essentially I run 17 ways to get green mana. As you see here, I run a couple colorless lands for some utility. I run 1 Gavany Township and a Ghost Quarter. that are just used to help in nasty situations when I need them to be there. However, the thing is, if you do run multiple color decks, you have to be considerate of how many colorless lands you can run. Considering if you run too many colorless lands, you won't have the right colors to produce your elaborate mana base. Like I say, developing a mana base can take some time and some testing, but having an efficient one really helps your performance as a player. One final word of warning is that even though a mana base can be the best it's ever been for any particular deck, there will be hands where you will have to mulligan, whether it be shortage of lands or just not getting the right cards. There is always the case where you will run into the occasional bad hand, regardless of how well or how long you worked on your mana base. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video has been of some help to you. If you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe, as everyone deserves to have the knowledge of Magic the Gathering and deck building advice. Doing so will help get this video and all the other videos on my channel out there. Again, thank you so much for watching. My name is Rita Spector, and I'll see you all next time.